for the invitation to Neo Academy. It will be a pleasure to have this nice talk today. My name is Claudia Rodriguez. I'm Peruvian. I have been working in education for 11 years here in Brazil, Universidad San Ignacio de Loyola. Previously, I had been living and studying and having been an entrepreneur in USA, which is one of my top destinations, of course, right now regarding higher education. And actually, I'm in charge of 2 international programs here at UCIL, by which our students do a 2+2 program. So they study 2 years with us here, and then they transfer to universities around the globe. And the other one is a dual degree program with San Ignacio University from Miami and UCIL, in which the students graduate with both bachelors, the American and the Peruvian from here. That's a big advantage for them.
Okay, thank you. And David?
It's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for the invitation. And Claudia, nice to meet you. I'm coming to you from the United States in central Vermont, where I am the co-founder and CEO of an organization called Lift Learning. And we provide educational technology to help primarily K-12 schools shift to a more deeply learner-centered approach to education. And we do that through providing a learning platform that allows for co-creative, project-based, interdisciplinary experiences. And we also, a large part of our work is to help schools come to terms with a competency-based approach to shift the focus from traditional assignments and grades in classes to a more open skill-based focus. And that's a change process that here in the United States and globally is becoming increasingly urgent and important as higher ed and the workforce are looking for candidates with more self-direction and more demonstrated performance. And I came to this work as a practitioner. I have a background in mental health counseling, working with youth and family, really focused on trauma-informed systems of care, focused on strength-based models of engagement, whole person learning. And the developmental psychology is a very important contribution to the field of education right now, because we can be interested in wellness as much as achievement and credentials.
So this is a really interesting mix here, because we've got so myself, I'm working in education. We have Alejandra with NEO, so that connected to the world of education in a really broad way. And Claudia, you've got a background in entrepreneurship, so coming from business into education, and David coming from a mental health background into education. So between us, I guess we can figure something out, no?
We should cover all the topics then.
Alejandra, do you want to start off with anything?
Yeah, absolutely, from my end. But well, first of all, I would like to thank the two of you for being here. And again, I think it's very important for me from Neo Academy to start sharing our voices on why we're doing these Neo chats, right? And I think it's in my opinion one of the first reasons to start making that positive change for the generations to come, right? And if we don't get this conversation started, as much of a taboo as it can sound in some institutions, it's going to be very complicated to make it happen soon, right? So I think it's very, very interesting. And for me, when Mark and I were discussing this topic of how do we actually integrate some flexibility in the admissions at a higher education level, I immediately thought of Claudia, as I was mentioning before, because this is a conversation we've had previously on how we can adapt both from a K-12, but also to a higher education perspective. And then speaking with Mark as well, we thought, David, that the approach that you are implementing is just something that we would really want to share out loud. And you said it very well, integrating, giving as much importance to things that are more on the soft side of skills compared to the credentials or hard skills is something that we truly need to start embedding in curriculums, right? So I think not only from an academic perspective, but also in terms of the mindset that needs to change. So this is why we're here today. And I want to thank you both for being around. And Mark, I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah, thanks, Alejandra. It's interesting, like I said, the combination of backgrounds we've got here, because I was thinking that, you know, at the moment in the pandemic, we hear conversations in higher education about relaxing standards, you know, so okay, a recognition that the final year of high school has been so challenging for young people who have suddenly been, you know, shifted online. I've got all kinds of other stuff going on in the background that we can't even begin to imagine at a time when, you know, in their adolescent worlds, you know, other things should be happening and should be a priority and, you know, under normal circumstances. So the university response to this seems to be, let's relax entry standards. But what they're talking about really is, okay, we used to ask for an 83, now we're asking for a 75. But, you know, don't you think that perhaps there's an opportunity to not think about higher and lowering in this narrow field, but broadening access? And what I'd like to do is to ask you, David, because it's almost like to see if you can let us understand how it is that you're evidencing a broader scope of a learning journey to, for example, universities and things. And then it would be really interesting to hear Claudia's reaction to that, you know, with your background in both business and education, if you see this as an advantage, if you see this as something that universities should be getting more interested in. So David, could you just give us a bit of an idea of how you're doing this? How do you actually evidence the skills and competencies on a learning journey?
I'm happy to jump in. Before I speak about the specifics in practice, I want to just take a quick moment to sort of go up a level and say, in this pandemic, as you said, all of our institutions and even all of us as individuals are really re-examining our principles, redesigning our institutions around questions of access, social justice, environmental justice, and such. And so this is, I think, just part of a bigger evolution of the global family right now, figuring out what kind of future we want to create. And so in terms of evidencing competencies and sort of alternative modes of accountability that can occur in this opportunity of re-examination, I think shifting to a skills framework is necessary, but not necessarily sufficient to get us to where we really want and need to be. Certainly we can focus on a crosswalk between soft skills, personal development and growth, and academic skills and technical skills. And we can translate mastery of these individual skills into something that looks kind of like traditional course grades. But is that authentic? Does that mean that the candidate is going to move from high school experience and truly be ready for higher education or the workforce? And the answer is no, not unless the feedback itself, the interactions between the educators and the students are very rich. They need to be centered around the skills. They need to be deeply connected to the criteria of what mastery and performance look like. And if we do that, and we find some temporary ways to translate that into, you know, traditional accountability metrics, then I think higher ed will be receptive to these new types of transcripts, which are bodies of work that could have occurred inside of a traditional class setting, but could also have occurred on the job, in the community, you know, in the family. We need to include a much more diverse body of work that can count as data points around a mastery of a particular skill. And so, yes, let's talk about skills and skill areas and soft skills, and let's support that with real world examples of that. And that'll give the the admissions office the ability to really evaluate, is this somebody that's ready to persist? Is this somebody that, you know, is knows themselves, can take charge of their own learning, who can make it? And I think that's the interesting thing, is that it's really not the institutions that necessarily need to disrupt themselves. The young people who are self-empowered and self-directed and self-aware will disrupt the systems because they're already champions of the future. If we step aside and listen to their voices, we'll know pretty much exactly what we need to do. And it's just a question of how easy or difficult we're going to make that for them. If we continue to insist on compliance and credentials, then the road may be a little bit more difficult. But if we focus on the human dimension and the wellness, and then the change doesn't have to be quite as difficult. But I think we need to listen to that student voice to know what we need to do as stewards of the future.
Claudia, how do you react to that? Thinking about from the position of higher education, but again, always with, you know, these are not new things in the world of business and entrepreneurship, of course, but in higher education, it's slightly different scenario. Do you think that the universities, or perhaps your particular university, is receptive to the idea of not a student not just presenting a number and grades, but here's a portfolio that represents me as a person in a number of different dimensions, and talks not just about my knowledge in a certain restricted framework, but actually how much I know myself, how much I understand myself, you know, that I'm ready to direct my own learning at a higher level. Do you think that universities are open to this?
I would say that definitely yes, that the admissions criteria is not only a grade that you get in a test, but it's more than that. For example, many universities here in Peru, they have the system of interviews. So in the interview, one of the main objectives is to assess these soft skills that David has been also referencing to. So it's about how are you communicating? What's your knowledge already about your future? Maybe, of course, it's uncertain. Remember that here in Peru, students will be applying to universities when they are 17 or 16, some of them, so they are very young. And the parents take a huge part in this decision process making. So it is part of the equation to hear to them also, and then explore, is there a fit between what you are looking for and this university or not? And as we know, different universities have different environments, right? Do you match with it or not? And some universities, for example, the one that I work for a long time has been identified with entrepreneurship. So many of the families and the students that come are entrepreneurs here in Peru, because they find that it's a perfect continuation of what they see at home, and we agree, of course, on that. And afterwards, as you were saying, we try, and this has been, of course, a very strange and sad year for many of the students graduating from high school. I can see through social media about all these passing of time ceremonies that didn't go to, at least in Peru, they were all online, and they could not say goodbye to their classmates and their teachers. In Peru, they say 12 years. So 12 years of your life, and you are 16 or 17, have been there, and you were not able to close properly that moment. So they are coming, as David mentioned, in a time of was unexpected, with big changes. And as you know, at that age, parents were not so important as the friends. So many of them have been losing those ties. So again, and on the other side, once they get accepted in the universities, they won't have that day of orientation where we can see each other, meet each other. That when I was in charge of doing live sessions, I would say, please look around. These are going to be your classmates, maybe your future partners. Maybe you will be your best friends forever. Husband and wife, maybe you get married. And now that part, I think that's missing. I'm not trying to do innovations right now for 2021 to recreate a social space where they can have what we have lost in 2020. So that will be my main effort right now. In Peru, imagine we have, of course, the penetration of higher education is not high enough. It's not like well developed because we are still a developing country. And 30% of the students that used to go to university level education won't be coming back this year. That's already the KPIs that we have, because the parents lost their job, because they are not in a good situation. Plus the connectivity. Who has Wi-Fi access? And where in Peru? Peru, as you know, has the highlands, the Andes in between. So it's very, very tricky. You don't get that. So part of our, for example, efforts was also to communicate the students and the parents that the university, for example, was giving out chips so they could connect from wherever they were to facilitate, again, the access to this. In the other program that I am in charge, in which we send the students abroad to universities in the US, Canada, Australia, and Europe, what we have seen is that there is also more openness. I won't say that they have downgraded the standards, not that, but it's an understanding, of course, in the case of Peruvian students go all the way to the other country, has lots to be with visas. And I would say that more than the university, those were the very higher requirements. Some students have to do like a triangulation, go from Lima to Madrid, and in that consulate, get the visa and go to the US. So Alejandra knows those terrific cases that are very complicated. So I would say that this generation will be more resilient because of all this. Now the students that really want to go abroad and they're doing all this huge journey to get there, it's because they really want it. What I'm seeing from the other side of the admissions of other universities, there could be more flexibility. They are even allowing you to save your spot maybe for the next semester. If you're not ready, not visa, or do it online, even you can do it all online. So there is a part of how to really manage each case, case by case.